we're going to continue this series. We're wrapping up kind of the first three chapters of this letter today. And I've mentioned it before, but the first three letters were kind of this blessing that Paul wrote to the church, to this group of people in Ephesus that made up this body of believers. And so he writes this letter in the first three chapters are kind of this blessing that he's just sending out. He's saying, this is who you are, right? This is what God has done. This is what God is doing. And then he kind of transitions it a little bit. And we're going to have Caleb next week and Pastor Mark the week after kind of help us transition into what Paul writes to the church of Ephesus. And he says, now go be. Right? Go be the church. Go be light. Go be a difference. Go be imitators. Go be ambassadors. And so we're going to help go through that. But last week we wrapped up chapter 2. And what we realized is Paul is writing and he says, we're no longer foreigners and strangers, but instead we have been brought near, right? We have been brought near to God. And he started in verses 14 through 17. For he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside his flesh with the law, with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. He came and preached peace to you who were far, and peace to those who were near. See, through the cross and through Jesus, we have been brought near. And if you remember, we had this dividing wall, and we talked about the things that kind of become barriers for us, right? Maybe it's our past, and maybe it's fear, or maybe it's our expectations. We've gone through things that really just didn't go the way that we thought. And so because of that, we end up having what we would call droughts, right? And we begin to build up all these things that simply just become a wall between us and God, that we allow a separation between us. But Paul writes and he says, that's not us anymore. That's not who we are anymore, because through the cross, we have access to the Father. See, through the cross, the Father has brought us near so that we might be people of reconciliation, either in our relationship with him or in our relationship with others. See, we are people of grace, of love, people of hope, and people, because of the cross, of reconciliation, restoration, and redemption. But I'm excited this week as we dive into chapter 3. We're going to be in verses 14 through 21 this week. We're going to see this prayer that Paul prays. He prays this prayer. We're going to talk about prayer later on in this letter, but he kind of prays this prayer, and it really is just a moment of transition. But Paul, as we get there, has said a few words over and over throughout chapter 1 and chapter 3. If you go back and look at any of those and kind of see where he begins, he'll say, for example, this: for this reason. Right? He says, for this reason. He says it many times throughout this letter. He says, for this reason. But what does that mean? Paul is saying, in other words, as a result of, right? Consequently, on the grounds of this, or my favorite, because of this, or because of that. Right? Paul's saying, because of this or because of that. Now, as kids, we grow up, or if you have kids, you've grown up and you've probably had the response because. Right? Because we kids like to ask questions, and then you'll give them an answer. And what's their next word? Why? Right? Why? And then you give them another answer. Well, why? And then you give them another answer, and they say, why? And so what do? What's our natural response? We say, because. Right? Because. And maybe it's because I said so. Or maybe it's because I'm the adult. Or maybe it's just we don't have an answer and we're just saying because. And we're done with answering. We're trying to move on. And so we just say because. Paul is kind of saying that in these verses. He's saying because. Right? Because of God, because of the cross, because of him, we get to be. And he kind of prays this blessing over the church. He starts in verse 14. For this reason, For this reason, I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us, to him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus throughout all generations, forever and ever. Amen. Now, I mentioned that this is kind of Paul's because moment. Now, I don't think Paul's writing this with an I'm done attitude or don't ask again attitude. No, that's not the case of what Paul's saying here. What Paul's doing is he's cheering them on, right? He is in full confidence speaking these things to the church and to the people of Ephesus. And Paul's preparing to transition them a little bit in the next few chapters. But he's saying, because of Jesus, may we be strengthened with power through his Spirit so that Christ may dwell. Think about that. Because of Jesus, may we be strengthened with power through his Spirit, through, not us, not our own doing, our own selves, but through his Spirit so that Christ may dwell. And if we're being honest this morning, maybe there are moments, and we've shared this, it's kind of been a theme already this morning, I feel like, but maybe there's been moments in your life or in the day-to-day this week where you aren't feeling all that empowered. Right? You're not feeling all that strengthened. And just before this, Paul writes in verses 1 through 13, he talks about, don't be discouraged for my sufferings. Don't be discouraged because I am suffering. And there are moments in life where we go through sufferings. We go through storms. Right? Just this week, Bloomington was hit with just something. We don't even know, I think, what it was. It was so big. And things were just down. And we had Jennifer was there, and she kind of got trapped in Bloomington and had to go back the way she came and was kind of just stopped. And we had some others in the church, Shannon, who was trapped. And they said it was like Armageddon. Like everything was red. You pull up the map, it's all red, and trees were down. And we had some doctor visits this week where we had to go to Bloomington, and I've never in my life driven over power lines, but I did it like 3 times. Okay, I did it like 3 times, and we were able to do that. But it was a mess, right? It was a mess. It was a storm, a physical storm that took place, and that happened throughout this week. And sometimes we go through them. And here's what we know about them: they're unwarranted and they're unpredictable. Right? Now, we get warnings sometimes about them, but ultimately they're unwarranted and they're unpredictable. And this is what the people in Ephesus might be feeling. Things that were a little unwarranted and unpredictable. They were people that Christianity was kind of new to them. They were trying to figure it out. What does life look like being gathered together? What does life look like being unified in Christ and embracing his love, his graces, his mercy on our lives? And you kind of see Paul telling them, hey, it might get a little unwarranted and unpredictable, right? It might be that way. But what did Paul pray? What did Paul pray? That you would be strengthened with power. That you would be strengthened with power, not on our own, but through his Spirit. Now, I asked a few to help me today, and if they don't mind coming right on up here and helping me and kind of showing us what that might look like. And I might help them a little bit today, but Pastor Mark's going to sit down right here in this chair. And what we think sometimes is we have to go through life, whether it's suffering or whatever it may be, we have to do it in our own strength. And so, Asher, I just want to ask, do you think you could lift your dad, Pastor Mark, up out of this chair on your own? Could you try it and just see? Could you make it happen? Could you don't hurt your back. Listen, he's got tennis and golf. Could you try? It ain't gonna happen. Okay, ain't gonna happen. But do you think any of you could do it if you tried it? You think you could do it? No, you don't think you can? I don't think I could either on my own. But I'm wondering if together we could lift him up out of this chair. Do you think we could do that? Let's try it at this time. Let's see. Okay, I'll go right here. Yeah, all right. Ready? Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Oh, boy. Oh, look at that. There we go. We didn't drop. Okay, thank you guys. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. The strength and power that we can embrace that is not of our own, but of something so much bigger. See, when we embrace the strength and power of that which is not of our own, things become more possible. Right? Things become more possible. Yes, we may go through suffering. Yes, there may be uncertainty. There may be unpredictable. There may be unwarranted things. But the reality is we can go through those things and things become more possible. Why? Because we're not on our own. We're not alone. We're with God. And together we embrace and we embrace the power and strength that is of Him. But Paul doesn't stop there in his prayer. He doesn't end with just that. He continues and he prays and he says in verses 17 through 19, "And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge." I love that verse. Underline it, circle it, do something, highlight it. But I love what Paul is asking, what Paul is praying for us. But it also asks a question. It begs me to ask a question. If you look at our hearts today, right? If we just examined ourselves today and examined our hearts today, what would you say dwells there? What would you say dwells there? What is at the foundation and the root of our hearts? Think about that for a minute. Paul prays and he says, may we be people who are rooted and established in one thing, and that thing is in love. Because of Jesus, because of the cross, because in love, God has, while we were still sinners and dead in our transgressions, made us alive in Him. Because of His graces that are incomparable, because of these things, we may be people who are rooted and established in love. Now, when we think of being rooted, we often think of something like this, right? We think of a giant tree. And we see this tree is pretty big. I mean, it would take a minute to kind of probably cut down or try to move or try to get out of the way. You can see that it's pretty rooted as well, right? Its roots have been established. Its roots have been grounded, and it's not going anywhere anytime soon. I want to make a quick note. To be rooted and established, it takes time, right? It takes time. That tree didn't get that way in just a matter of minutes or a matter of seconds, but it takes time to be established and rooted. And the same is for us when it comes to the love of God. When Paul's praying in love, he's saying that we may know the love of God, to be established and rooted in it. Can I just tell you, it takes time. It takes time. These roots, they don't get this way without time. Growth and maturity run their course, and this tree, like any tree, becomes established and rooted. Like us, when growth and maturity takes place and we become established in love because of God's love, over time we establish ourselves in what is unconditional. Right? It's not the love that we may have learned from the world or the love that we may know it as, but it becomes love that is of God, that is unconditional. We establish ourselves in a love that surpasses knowledge. See, will suffering occur? Yeah. Will hardships happen? Yes. Will it be hard sometimes to love and to even be loved? Yeah, it will. But because of the cross, we get to know and have a love that is not of our own, a love that is greater. What does establishing and being rooted in love look like, though? It takes growth and maturity, but what does it truly look like? I think it looks like the next picture on there is a picture of a pando tree. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of these kinds of trees. It's a pando tree, and it kind of looks really like a forest. If you go back to that other one, it kind of looks like a forest of trees. And when looking at it, it doesn't look that big. Right? When you see this, it doesn't look that big. I could probably come up to one of these, and some of them at least, and kind of give them a hug, right? I could probably get my whole arms around them. They're not that big. They're not really that tall. They're not really that wide. But here's the cool thing about a pando tree. Pando is Latin for spread. And this tree is a single tree that spans over 106 acres based in Utah. This tree is 3 times heavier than the next largest tree, coming in at 13.3 million pounds. That's crazy. That is a huge tree. How is this tree one when looking at it and we see so many, right? We see so many different trees. How is this tree one? Because just below the surface, you will find that the pando tree has one root system. While the organism looks like thousands of individual trees, there are the same organism comprised of the same DNA regenerated over thousands of years into new suckers or stems that grow to replace the older ones. Much of pando shares the same root system. Right? If you look just below the surface, it's all one giant tree. See, by itself, love is great, but together love becomes greater, right? By itself, love is great, but together love becomes greater. We are people that by ourselves can experience love. We can experience certain things, but we are people because of God and being one with God who can be established and rooted in love. See, may we be people. This is kind of what Paul's getting at in this letter. May we be people who know love, and not just love that is good, but know love because of Jesus and being one with him. May we get to live in love and grasp a love that is wide, that is long, that is high, that is deep, and get to grasp a love that is like no other. It said this in verse 18 and 19, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge. We can't even fathom it. We can't even comprehend it. It's that big. And then the end of verse 19, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. What does the fullness of God look like? How are we filled to the measure of it? Can I just say, by love? By love, we get to experience it. Paul's praying that we may know this love, that the love of Christ that has for us be the same love that we go and share to those around us. I mentioned that he kind of transitions this. He's praying this because he's transitioning. He says, in that same love is how you go and be the church, how you go and share the light, how you go be imitators in him. It's all because of love. This is a prayer, but it's also a sending prayer. Right? He's sending the church out. He's saying, go and be. He says, may you know and may together you grasp so that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Now, this week was VBS, and we spent a lot of time with kids, and it was a great time. It was a joy just to get to watch God work in their lives. And if you ever come to my house, you're going to see in the living room, right below our TV, we have these books, and they're all kinds of kids' books. And we try to read them every now and then. A lot of times our kids will get them and just kind of spread them out everywhere. But one thing kids like is stories. Right? Kids like stories. And I got the privilege during VBS to share some stories of the Bible and try to show what that looks like. But one of my favorite stories that I've read as a kid and get to the privilege of reading to my kids is the story of the giving tree. Anybody ever hear the story of the giving tree? You know that story? Anybody? Okay, I see a couple of you. Well, I love this story, and I'm going to paraphrase it. So this is probably like my version. Okay, so maybe you need to get the book and read it yourself. It's a great one. But it's this story about this tree and this boy. And this boy would walk up to this tree, and the boy was kind of sad, and the tree said, "Come, swing in my branches, come and be happy," right? And the boy said, "Well, I don't have anything to eat, so I'm not happy." And so the tree said, "I have some apples. Take my apples, go and even sell them and make some money so that you can eat and be happy." So the boy takes the apples and he goes into town, he sells them, and he is happy. But then he comes back, and the tree said, "Come, swing on my branches, come, be happy." And the boy said, "I'm not happy. I'm getting older now, and I want a family. I want kids. I want to settle down. I want to build a home." And so the tree says, "Hey, I've got branches. The forest is my home, but I've got branches. Come, cut down my branches and go and build you a house and start a family." And so the boy climbs up the tree, cuts the branches down, takes them, goes and builds a home, right? And the tree was happy. The boy comes back. Says, "Hey, I don't have anything else. You know what? I want to get a boat. I want to build a boat so I can get as far away from here as possible." The tree said, "I don't have a boat for you, but why don't you cut me down to the trunk and you can go and make a boat and sail away." So the boy cuts the tree down, builds a boat, goes and sails away. The tree was happy, so it thought. Time went on, time just continued to go, and all of a sudden, the boy, who is now older, comes back. And the tree says, "I'm sorry, boy, I don't have anything for you." The boy says, "No, I don't need any of that. I don't need apples. I don't need branches for a house. I don't need a tree for a boat. I just need a place to sit and rest." And so the tree, now being just a trunk, straightens up as best as it can and says, "Come sit here and rest, and we will be happy." And so the story ends about the giving tree that just gave everything, right? Gave everything. And there's one thing in that story that I continue to just catch as I read that story and read that story. Is every time the tree gave, it was what? It was happy. It was happy with what it gave. See, love and happiness sometimes comes from what we are able to give. And that isn't always in the form of finances. Yes, finances are great. Tithes and offerings, they exist and they should happen. And we should do that. We should give those things. But what if, like Paul's prayer, what we're really called to do is be a lot like the giving tree? And some of you are saying, "Yeah, I hear you, and I know what you're saying, but maybe we're at different stages in life, and I'm more of like that giving tree that all I've got is just a stump, and I don't have anything to give," right? I've got nothing. And what I would tell you is you can't give what you don't have, right? You've heard that. But can I tell you something? We can all give kindness. We can all give joy. We can all give hope. We can all give love. We can all go and bear fruits, right? Because of Jesus, we're not doing this on our own, but because of Jesus and through the cross and because of God, we can go and be the church together, right? Together, we can go and be that. We get to go and be a part of it. See, the church was happy, or the tree was happy. And I feel like the church gets to be too. And it's not because of our circumstances. It's not because of our situations. But it's because together we can grasp how far and wide and high and deep the love of God really is. And I believe when we do that, we begin to be filled to the measure of the fullness of God. See, because of that, we get to be filled up to the fullness of God. We've shared it each week. We've come through and we've shared it. Over the summer, we've been challenged to be for the one. To be for the one, to be for God and to be for others. And this isn't to brag about us or to brag about Restoration. See, we're not a mega church. We're not great maybe in numbers for some, right? And maybe we don't have as much as others have. But can I just share with you together, just in 1 month, by being for God and for others, and you've already heard about it, we've been able to help and be a part of 6 families In 1 month, we've been able to give, whether it was financially, whether it was prayer, or whatever it may be. We've been able to help and be a part with 6 families. Guys, that's what Paul says. He says, go and love. Go and do. And that isn't to share and toot our horn. It's to say, look what happens when we become people that are for the one, for God and for others. We may not be able to give and do everything, but we can go and share. We can go in love. We can together try and just grasp a little bit of the love of God that surpasses knowledge. Can I just tell you, those families that were able to be blessed, it was just that. It was a blessing. It was a blessing for them. It might have been small, but to them, they just felt like, just for a moment, they weren't alone. They weren't by themselves. But yet, there was the love of God with them through the church.